I recall years ago, actually, I'd been saved 6 years, and I remember thinking, gosh, I've been saved 6 years and I've made hardly any progress. Perhaps you've had thoughts like that yourself. Then I was reading sometime after that in Mark, something that was very encouraging. In fact, it's found in Mark chapter 4, verses 26 through 29, which reads, "And he said, so is the kingdom of God as if a man should cast seed into the ground, and should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should spring and grow up. He doesn't know how. For the earth brings forth fruit of itself, first the blade, then the ear, and after that the full grain in the ear. But when the fruit is brought forth immediately, he puts in the sickle, because the harvest is come." Interesting little illustration. The kingdom of God is like somebody who plants a seed. Let's think of that just for a moment, and let's think of a tomato seed. If I put a tomato seed into the ground and cover it with soil and water it, and assuming that there's warmth in the air for the growing season, within a few days, a little green shoot comes up. And then after several weeks, the shoot becomes a stalk. And after a few more weeks, now we have some branches that are growing off the main stalk with lots of leaves. But are there any tomatoes? No. There weren't any tomatoes when we put the seed in the ground. There weren't any when the first shoot came up. And now we've got a stalk. It could be 2 or 3 feet high. There's still no tomatoes. And then we watch, and a couple of weeks later, there's some yellow flowers. But there are no tomatoes. But then as the yellow flowers mature, it's not long before we begin to see little tomatoes growing on the vine where those flowers were. So what's the point of this parable that Jesus taught? I think it has to do with spiritual maturity. When we first plant the seed, no fruit. Even in the stages of development, the stalk grows, still no fruit. We got yellow flowers, no fruit. But finally, the fruit comes. But here's the question. Could I be any more mature in the inception of my new birth? I'm like a seed planted. Could I be any more mature than I am at that point? No. Could I be any more mature than a little green shoot that comes out of the ground at that point? No, I couldn't be any more mature. How about if I have 2 feet of stalk with no tomato? Well, no, I couldn't be any more mature than that. I couldn't be any more mature at any stage in the game in which I find myself. Now that's an interesting thought, because we think, no, every day I should be producing fruit. Well, there's truth in that. But here's what's encouraging. Let me just read one more verse. "So is the kingdom of God as if a man should cast seed into the ground, and should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should spring and grow up, but he doesn't know how." Here's what I think Jesus is saying. The kingdom of God grows. We as members of the kingdom grow too. But our level of maturity is totally in God's hands. The farmer doesn't know how the seed changes into a sprout, or how the sprout becomes a stalk and later with yellow flowers and fruit. He doesn't understand that. But he certainly understands if he does his part, he's going to end up with some tomatoes. But who gives us the tomatoes? God. In other words, the Christian life is totally in the hands of God. And the rate at which the plant matures is in God's hands. Of course, he uses weather, he uses sun, the absence or presence of moisture, and so on. But ultimately, God is doing the growing. So as we look at our own life, we may not be as far along as our friend Joe over here. We say, gosh, he's moving along in his Christian experience, and I don't seem to be making any progress. Oh, that's a bad way to think. God works at his speed. We don't know how he works to produce more and more Christ-likeness in us, but he is doing that every single nanosecond of every day. We must trust him. The fruit will come. But what we need to do is keep our eye on the fact that every day fruit is coming. It's not just the tomatoes at the end. which are really important, but it's the growth of the tomato vine. It's the growth of the Christian. God has predestined us to be conformed to the image of his Son. That work takes place all the time. So help us to think clearly about this and not to become discouraged, because everything about our life is designed to bring joy and encouragement to our souls.